Hello and welcome to Fireside Fairytales. If you've never been here before, my name is Rory, and you are watching Varietal Literature's YouTube channel, a cozy little corner of the internet for narrative. And I'm going to open tonight by asking my viewers to immediately tell me how sound levels and video are going, because I reached the point where the only way I could test this different OBS structure was just to go live with it. So this is me hoping that everything is working as intended or as per usual. Let me know if there are issues. It's actually part of the reason why I chose this topic tonight, but I'll explain that in a moment. Jumpstore says it's fine. So far, so good. Oh, that fan thing's back on. Okay. I'll have to fix that next stream. Yeah, if you are not watching this live and you're like, I don't care about any of this, how do I get to the stories? Down in the description below, there will be timestamps, and you can jump right ahead to whichever timestamp for whichever story is most interesting to you. But if you are watching live, you can keep yourself entertained in the chat. There is a live chat that has a little crop of potatoes growing right now. And I see Jumpstore, Tammy Morelli, Uncle Kitty. Oh, Witchery, good to see you. I know this isn't always the easiest day to make. I'm noticing all these little settings and stuff that I forgot to update. But that's a problem for future me. Witchery says, how boring to skip our hot mess. Okay. Also noticing that the whole computer is set up a little weird here. There we go. GS says, extra clear this week, Rory. Why is that? Well, it might be that the settings on this thing are better set up than the system I was using before. But I am glad to hear that. Okay, well, for those of you who are stuck with me live, I will stop wasting your time with this. If it's working, I'm happy it's working. Let me talk briefly about... Notice that I'm cooking my mic audio a bit, so I'm going to turn that down a bit. Yeah, anyhow, the subject this week I've called Haunted Cows. You could look at it a couple of different ways. You could say they're supernatural cows or something to that effect. It's a bit of a mixed bag. Mostly it's just cows that are weird. Some implied to be devil-possessed in some way. Some implied to be something other than a cow. We have looked at stuff before, creatures before that supposedly represent some kind of whatever. Some kind of either enchantment or false form or whatever. I mean, obviously this is very common stuff for folklore. In this case, though, we're going to focus specifically on cows. The stories tonight all come to us from Sunken Castle's Evil Poodles, which is a collection of translations by Jürgen Hubert, who you can support on Patreon, and if you are able to, you absolutely should. And just a reminder of what his project is, he is taking a bunch of stuff that was collected by people like the Grimm brothers and more, but not published. Without getting into too much of a description that I'm sure not most people are interested in, the folklorist will collect a lot of stuff and then put out collections. And for the most part, you folks out there only really know the collections. Those archives are kept, though. And so it's a mixture of sources, obviously. Some of them are published, some of them were not. But Jürgen's goal is to just sort of keep translating German folklore that has not previously been translated to English. And in that duty or service, he pursues on a Patreon, in which case I'm suggesting that you go support that Patreon if you think that's a worthy goal. As far as the stories tonight about, haunted cows, it's not super unique. I mean, his collection, which is quite massively at this point translated, has dogs, cats, just looking down the list here, pigs, hares, deer, horses, goats, birds, hybrid creatures, snakes, toads, and a whole bunch of other stuff, all supernatural or possessed or indicating the devil or something like that. So this is not super unique, but we are just going to look at the different ways that cows are seen in German folklore. They mostly follow a trend, and they're all kind of short little anecdotes, so they are sort of true folklore, not fairy tales. But if that's interesting to you, then hello, thank you for watching, and I'll get to the story. Okay. I think actually the thing I was most concerned about switching the setup is that the lip sync would be off, because that's a really common thing with streaming in general. So a whole bunch of settings that'll knock out the audio compared to the video. So that people are not having issues with that is good to hear. Witchery says, I feel like someone was kicked by a cow and wrote a burn book. Perhaps. Okay. Our first tale of the night is called The Red Cow of Warlin. It comes to us from Sunken Castle's Evil Poodles, a collection of translated German folklore by Jürgen Hubert, who you can support at, well, it won't be there yet, but a pinned link below, pinned comment below, when this video is no longer live. At the southern end of the village of Warlin, between the roads to Neubrandenburg and Praxdorf, there is a large sandy hill in which a barrow was discovered. Linked to this hill is the legend of the Red Cow. When the cow herd drove the cows to the grazing ground on the 1st of May, a red cow would arrive from the direction of the hill and join them. Every evening, when other cows were driven back home, she vanished. But, in the fall, she would return with a golden ribbon tied around her neck. This was the cow herd's payment. As soon as the ribbon was taken off her, she would, return to the hill, and only come back in the next spring. When once a craftsman's journey traveled past the hill, he saw the red cow lying on the ground, as if ill. He notified the cowherd of this, but as the latter arrived, the cow was gone, and has not been seen since. So, that is the core structure, basically. Cow does something weird, we don't know why, let's move on. So you'll know if that's for you. If you want more substantial stories, by the way, if you've just sort of dropped in on the channel, there are more substantial stories. These are small anecdotal folklore. Folklore comes in a broader selection than most people realize. All right. Our next tale, called The Cow from the Rock. And it also comes to us from Jürgen Hubert's Sunken Castle's Evil Poodles, a translated German folklore Patreon that you can support. Many years ago, the cowherd of Fanrode had his cattle graze next to Wittgenstein Hill. On several mornings he perceived an extremely beautiful cow had joined the herd, but he did not know to whom it belonged, nor where it came from. In the same manner, the cow vanished from the herd in the evenings without him noticing where it had ran off. Finally, as autumn approached, he decided to keep a keen watch along with his young assistant, and saw how the cow appeared out of the overgrown alders beneath the rock, and it went back into them in the evenings as well. The next evening, the cowherd went to uncover the mystery surrounding his cow further, and ran after it when it left the herd. The cow went into a crevice within the mountain and vanished. The cowherd followed it, entered a brightly lit corridor, and finally reached a door on which he knocked. Then a maiden came out and asked him, "What do you want?" "The herding fee for the cow you're sending me for grazing all those days," the cowherd answered, without fear. The maiden gave him an old $1 coin and said, "If you hadn't demanded anything, you would have received more." And she left the cowherd stand where he was and vanished. He walked out of the hill and never saw the cow on the pasture again, nor did he ever find the crevice again, which was the entrance to the mountain. Uncle Kitty says, cows aren't as nice as people think, Jump Store. It's a mix, I think. They can also be more affectionate than people realize, but they can also be mean. I mean, they're animals, right? At the end of the day, an animal's going to be an animal. All right. The next one has the charming name, the Spooky Cow. Gonna have a drink of water. Our next tale is called The Spooky Cow. That comes to us from Sunken Castle's Evil Poodles, a Patreon that supports the translations by Jürgen Hubert of Old German folklore. In the year 1454, a man named Balthasar Meiserkopf walked over the Moserberg in the direction of Eisenach one night. Not suspecting anything out of the ordinary, he suddenly perceived a fiery cow which approached him in a straight path, and he was overcome with no little fear and uttered an urgent prayer, and he made the sign of the cross 3 times as aid and protection against the evil enemy. Then suddenly the cow was gone, and it seemingly transformed into an old, warped birch tree which stood next to the path, and which he could not remember having seen before. This allowed him to pass the tree with a lot of trembling and trepidation, and when he had pushed past it, he fearfully and carefully turned round to look. Whoa! Suddenly, an old woman with an oven fork jumped away behind him and ran directly into the shrubbery and then out over the fields, and he saw her running for a long time, but there was no trace to be seen of the old birch tree next to the path, and a shudder overcame the man every time he thought of this witchery. Put that on a shirt, witchery. We're actually going to read that next one last. GS says, I watched the Scottish Summiteer on YouTube. He hikes the Scottish Highlands and is really afraid of cows. I think Witchery has the right comment there. Scotland is maybe the wrong place to hike if you're afraid of cows. I think it really depends on, the cow a bit. More wild they are, right? I don't know. I guess I feel like you encounter animals as animals. You have to assume that they are going to arbitrarily turn to violence at any given point, no matter what it is, whether it's a cat, a dog, or a cow, or a pig, or something, because they live in a world of unpredictability. As Hobbes said, the war of all against all, that constant paranoia and tension. They do find security in us, but that doesn't mean that they don't, have instincts that randomly tell them to, attack your arm and stuff. Witchery says, it's me, I'm in the stories. Indeed you are. Oh, hello, Lizzie Rose. All right. Our next tale is called The Black Cow. It also comes to us from Sunken Castle's Evil Poodles, translations by Jürgen Hubert, who you can support at his Patreon, which will be in a pinned comment below. When someone walks from Obermodden to Kirvilla, they will reach a small bridge leading across the mill stream to the left of the Buchse Vila. I don't think I did that any justice. Street, and within the district of this town. Here the black crow with a silver bell round her neck still grazes late in the evening. The herder boys often see her, and try to avoid her, even though they are familiar with her behavior and know she won't harm them. She carefully approaches wanderers who have lost their way and are attracted by the ringing ding ding ding, and wants to lick their hands. If they permit this, she docilely remains with them and leads them back onto the right path. But if someone dares to beat her or throw stones at her, she becomes enraged and puts them on her horns and hurls them into the mill stream. So she's, Hulk cow. Yeah, Witchery says, yeah, often prey animals are more violent than predator animals. See also bunnies. Yeah, I mean, and obviously they have to be. Jumpstore says, I always wanted a pet cheetah. Cheetahs don't see humans as food, unlike other larger wildcat species, and they love cuddles. I know that, I don't know how accepted it is, but I know that the theory is that they were domesticated cats in, Egyptian era that eventually got wild again. And that's why they have a lot of domesticated behaviors, because they are, of all the wildcats, the least wildcat-y. All right, the next story has the lovely name Moo-Calf. Anybody out there do a really good moo? You should do a really loud moo and see if anybody in your house says anything to you. That's my instruction to chat. Witchery says, I don't think they've been domesticated. Yeah, I don't know. I just know that that's one of the theories. That they, at one point, were relatively domesticated. On a pretty large scale. But again, it could have just been some clickbait article, and don't trust me on cat history. Anyways. Don't trust me on any history. I don't have the mind for it. I can barely recall names of people I just met. Our next tale is called The Moo-Calf. And it comes to us from Sunken Castle's Evil Poodles, a collection of German translations by Jürgen Hubert. You can support at his Patreon, which will be pinned in a comment below. This is a haunt which is known at the River Rhine, the Mosel, and in the places in the Eifel Mountains. This haunting is said to dwell at a specific location, for example, Münster Meifeld. Here it dwells in the middle of the town at the marketplace beneath the covered entryway of two houses, and there it usually lies, cowering in a corner. Only during extraordinary times, when something important was about to happen to the city, did it roar at night. In an uncanny manner, with a hollow and eerie voice that the streets echoed from it in a dull and terrifying manner. From this, it derives its name, Moo-Calf, or Moo-Calf in English. During special circumstances, it also left its dark abode, roamed through the street, and glared at those who accidentally encountered it in the manner of a calf. However, it did not have a typical color for a calf, but was gray-black like ash. Its plate-sized eyes glowed, and its head was rectangular. As it was not intended to push people down, it lacked horns. People disagreed whether it had legs, but they agreed that it did not move like other calves on 4 simple legs. It is even said that people have witnessed it floating in the air, and some claim the Moo-Calf is nothing other than the spirit of Caligula, who had been born near Münstermaifeld at Kulch. Pretty sure they don't mean the Roman Caligula there. Hence the clarification about the born near Münstermaifeld. Fable Witchery says, I mean, the real problem is domestication takes centuries to do properly. Yeah, which is why when you find things that behave domesticated, like it, the suspicion becomes that they were domesticated at one point, right? What do you think this line means, by the way, chat? People disagreed whether it had legs, but they agreed it did not move like other calves on 4 legs. And then it's even said that people witnessed it floating in the air, but that seems to leave this area where it doesn't float, and it's not crawling on like normal legs. My theory, caterpillar cow, not caterpillar, centipede cow, that's it. A cow with like 15 legs on either side that crawls along. What's your theory? Jumpstore says, scientists say that cats domesticated themselves. Maybe cheetahs did too. That would make sense. I mean, it's hard. I was talking to somebody the other day about this. It's hard to really appreciate just how old something like ancient Egypt is. Like, I forget. Like, like Athens, for example, lasts for thousands of years, I believe. Athens, the beginning of it, when it started as just sort of a kingdom of Athens, I believe, was further from the construction of the pyramids than we are from Athens. We're definitely from the Athens that you're thinking of, the Athens that around the for 1 BC, that kind of Athens. That is much further from the pyramids than we are from it. But just for perspective, even the beginnings of Athens is further from the construction of the pyramids than we are from it. And like really ponder that. Like the way we talk about Athenians is as if they were, a century or two away from the Egyptians, but they may as, in their mind, that was a deep ancient history. Witchery says Cleopatra lived closer to the moon landing than she lived to the building of the pyramids. There's lots of examples of stuff like this. I think, I don't remember what it was. Something like, I know that Oxford is older than something you really wouldn't think it was older than. I think it's like older than the Ottoman Empire or something like that. Anyways, the point is that our conception of time our conception of time is way off. Our conception of history is way off anyways. I don't remember how I even got on this tangent. Let's carry on with the stories. That's it. Lizzie Rose says, Oxford College is older than the Aztec Empire. That's right. That is true. Also, I mean, more relevant to folklore, I guess, because people get really stuck on, being canon mythologies and stuff like that. The writings that we reference most for Norse mythology were written so long after they would have been like active stories, active oral traditions. I think it would be like the equivalent of somebody writing down folklore beliefs from something like the 17th century or the 18th century to us. Like there's that much of a gap between the Poetic Edda's writing and the things that it's largely referencing. I shouldn't be doing this off the cuff. I'm sure I'm getting lots of details wrong. But I think it's worth keeping all of that in mind when you're looking at this stuff and you are trying to like put together a sense of history and whatever, how long the human race has been at it. Okay. The next story is called The Red Calf, and it is a reference to a type of spirit we've seen before in a very arbitrary way. We looked at maybe last year in German folklore the idea of the Aufwacher. See how Google's translates that. Watch this video, get no views because it thinks I'm swearing. Which is just a type of spirit that sort of sickens and usually, well, it sickens a person, but it often can kill them, usually just sickens them. And its connection to sort of a thing that mounts your back, which is also a thing. Our next tale is called The Red Calf, and it comes to us from Sunken Castle's Evil Poodles, a translation of German folklore put together by Jürgen Hubert, who you can support at his Patreon. Quite a few people in Zarn have seen a red calf in the evening. Whoever saw it had to say, "What do you want? I'm going home." And if they did so, then nothing happened. Once a young man went to the spinning chamber. He likewise encountered the red calf, but the young man said nothing when he saw the red calf, and suddenly a cat meow, jumped on his back, and no matter how much he tried to shake it off, he did not succeed. And when he reached the front of his home, the cat was suddenly gone from his back, but the young man died 3 days later. Spinning chamber, by the way, means we've talked at length about this, but if you're just stepping into the stream, it's just a room where a bunch of usually women would spin things like flax and maybe cotton and wool. Not really cotton in Germany, but like wool or flax for the most part. And it was usually like a big thing where a bunch of people would get together and spin in this chamber together, so they only had to heat one chamber and so on. Okay. Our next tale and our penultimate tale for the night is called The Calf on the Weißbach Hills as a Sign of Warning. A calf is dwelling in the Weißbach hills, which frequently appears to the inhabitants of the surrounding communities, and in particular serves them as a sign of warning that someone intends to do something unrighteous. The following incident will be shared as proof for this claim. One Sunday, several young men walked from Weißbach to Jonsdorf. When they set out on their way back home again in the evening, they decided to plunder the trees of a poor serf, as the cherries were ripe at the time. And when they walked off the path and into the darkness, they came near the cherry trees. They saw the black calf lying before them, which stuck its tongue out for a rather long distance. The young men were so appalled by this ugly sight that they now felt shame about their ignoble intent and went home without committing a theft. And when one of them was tempted to do something unrighteous later on, they remembered the calf. In this way, they were saved from many missteps. As a structure, not a new idea in folklore. But I've never seen a cow stuck its tongue out so much that I became righteous in a story. God, it's so weird. Why are humans such weird creatures? Lizzie Rose says, a cow stuck out its tongue at them and they repented? Yep. It's so strange. Okay. And now for our final tale of the night, and the one that for whatever reason is just the most fun to me. The Village Teacher and the Devil Cow. Also, it comes to us from Sunken Castle's Evil Pools, translation by Jürgen Hubert. A village teacher living in a village close to Drebkow. Once lived in a village close to Drebkow, rather. This teacher was a moody, stern man, so that people only called him the evil village teacher. I feel like you should have to do more than that for that moniker. Everything grew splendidly in his garden and on his small field, and although he had only a scrawny cow, he nevertheless sold the most butter to the city out of the entire village. When the farmers noticed this, they all wanted to see the cow. The people who succeeded in this were mystified about the fiery eyes of the cow, her large nostrils, the long pointed ears, the bent tail. And when the village teacher's wife had died, the teacher did all the work on his estate on his own. One day he was busy with milking. His neighbor, who was curious, looked for the cow through a small gap in the wall of the stable, and then she saw that the cow was chewing on a rope, which was hanging over her back. And when the village teacher pulled on the end of the rope, the milk poured out of the rope and into the milk bucket. In other words, he was sort of milking it like a teat. But when the cow looked around, the pure devil's eyes glittered in her head, and the woman shared in the village what she had seen, and since that time the cow was called the Devil Cow. A heavy thunderstorm arose on the 7th Sunday after Trinitatis. And in the same year as this incident, and the air was muggy and oppressive, and when the village teacher came into the stable in order to milk the cow, the latter was greatly molested by flies. In order to protect himself from the strikes of the tail, which the cow used to shoo away the annoying flies, the teacher tied the tail to his coat. But now it was impossible to even contemplate milking the cow, which was tortured by the flies, tore away from the crib, and rushed out of the stable, and down the road, and out of the village, and pulled the teacher after her all the while. The farmer woman shouted towards the teacher, "Oh my God! Oh my God!" The headman stood at the edge of the village and shouted, Teacher, where do you intend to go?" "Only the devil knows, and my cow," answered the village teacher. And the journey went on, through wide spaces and narrow ones, over sticks and stones, through forest and swamp, and finally the cow and the village teacher vanished, and no one has seen or heard of them since. The path on which the cow vanished together with the village teacher is now called Teufelsweg, or Devil's Path. And even today, a Thanksgiving Mass is held every year on the seventh Sunday after Trinitatis in this village. The thing that I love about these sort of tales is because they're not really like constructed like a normal tale. You know, there's lots of theories on like where a lot of this sort of more anecdotal folklore comes from. And the general opinion is it's probably a reference to something that was real at one point, like a real incident, and then it just sort of grows in the telling. But because it's not really being told to like portray themes and stuff, it's meant to sort of preserve a presumed real history, it just doesn't make any effort to make sense, right? Like it doesn't try to tell you what's going on because it just assumes no one knows. And I think that's something that's very like charming and engaging about this, because it also just leaves a lot of space for you as a sort of listener of these stories and somebody who, you know, now it's a part of sort of your culture, that they're in the oral tradition here for YouTube, if you want to think of it that way, that you can make something of it, of all those gaps. You can weave it together as you see so fit. Witchery says, you know, Lestat, as in the vampire Lestat, if you don't know, talks about the Devil's Road a lot. Maybe he was once stolen by a cow and didn't add it to his memoirs. She would never do anything that interesting in her books. Her books are a pretty straightforward gothic romance. But I like the idea of a little bit of gonzo. Oh, that was oh no, never mind, that was Witchery. Jumpstore says, also Australia is both a country and an island. All right. Well, I'm glad the stream didn't melt down. As I continue my switch over, it's interesting to hear that it was clearer today. I wonder what did that. There's so many settings on this end, and I would say I only understand about 15% of them, so there you go. Yeah, as for me, I appreciate everybody, you know, joining in the chat, talking to me, keeping me company. If you were just out there larking, thank you all the same. I hope you enjoyed the stream. We'll be back next week with more stories about weirdness. One of the reasons I wanted to do the cow one is because it doesn't really have any like story that I would be really long and in the middle of. If this stream just melted, I wouldn't feel super bad about, you know, should I keep the original stream or not or whatever. It was lots of little short tales. Yeah, I should start my search for some more seasonal stuff, but we'll see how it goes. Anyhow, thank you Tammy, Witchery, Uncle Kitty, Jumpstore, GS, Lizzie Rose, who was in there. Jumpstore, if I didn't say it. Anybody else I'm forgetting? Hopefully not. See, it's a good thing I'm not popular. Because if I was, I would start forgetting people's names and they get offended. Jumpstore says, thanks for the stories, Rory. Chat got a bit dark, but this was mostly fun. This is not dark for this chat. This chat's been way darker before. I am delighted to hear that your surgery's done and your stables are out, Uncle Kitty. Hopefully it works as designed. As for me, I'll keep the fire going. You folks, have yourself a good sleep.